Welcome to the next edition of PennFuture's video series on data centers. My name is Jessica O'Neill. I'm a lawyer based out of our Philadelphia office, and I work on PennFuture's legal work across the state. PennFuture is a member-supported, nonprofit environmental organization that strives to protect Pennsylvania's air, water, and land, and to empower citizens to build sustainable communities for future generations. My work focuses on energy issues and water quality. As a reminder, this is part of PennFuture's ongoing series on data centers. Today, we will be focusing on air impacts from data centers. Data centers are facilities that house computing infrastructure that IT systems require, and that folks are discussing over and over again as being necessary to support a growing demand for artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT and other AI products. As we discussed in our earlier videos, AI and the cloud are only sort of virtual. These facilities have to exist somewhere in the physical world, where they use power and water, as previous videos focused on. And those facilities have impacts, both direct and indirect, on our air quality. Let's dive in a little deeper. The air impacts from the data center are really all associated with the process of making the electricity to operate the machines. And here we're focused on operation of the data center and not the manufacturing of the data center and the components in it. So focusing on the operation, we're focusing on the electricity. I'm going to divide the electricity up into three categories. The first is electricity made off-site and transmitted to the data center via our electricity grid. The second is electricity generated on-site and transmitted directly to the data center, often called co-location. And the third is backup electricity generation to ensure that the data center never stops running. Here's the key to all three categories. How you make the electricity matters. Let's start with the first, electricity made off-site. This electricity is made at a power plant that is interconnected into our electrical grid and then available to be transmitted to electricity customers. Our electrical grid here in Pennsylvania is operated by a regional transmission organization called PJM. PJM is in charge of interconnecting power plants to the grid, ensuring that there's enough available power for all of the users of the grid, and planning for transmission so that there are ways to get the power to where it needs to go. Electricity that comes from the grid is made in a variety of ways. This is the fuel mix, meaning the various types of electricity that was being made and sent into the PJM grid on the morning of Friday, September 5th, 2025. As you can see, the largest component of the electricity generation mix was coming from fracked gas. The second largest component was coming from nuclear power generation. So that leads us to the next question. What are the air impacts of making electricity with fracked gas? Well, we know the answer to this question. Fracked gas power plants emit pollutants including nitrogen oxides, or NOx, hazardous air pollutants, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. We can see in this slide the planned annual emissions limits for a variety of air pollutants for the proposed fracked gas plant at Homer City, Pennsylvania, which is intended to provide power for a still-to-be-planned data center. So you can see in this chart on the left what they are asking to be allowed to emit from the fracked gas power plant: NOx, carbon monoxide, VOCs. Moving down, we see particulate matter, sulfur oxides, sulfuric acid, lead, and greenhouse gases. I'm going to come back later to greenhouse gases. On the right, you can see a table that is a breakdown of the hazardous air pollutants that they're asking to be allowed to emit, including chromium, lead, benzene, and xylene. I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of these pollutants. The first one here is NOx. Exposure to NOx can cause numerous health issues. NOx is a particularly dangerous pollutant because it is a precursor pollutant, meaning that NOx chemically reacts with other substances to produce additional pollutants. NOx is a precursor for both harmful smog, or ozone, and PM, particulate matter pollution. Ground-level ozone and particulate matter are linked to cardiovascular illnesses, respiratory problems, and premature death, both in the short term and over a longer exposure period. Particulate matter, which is our next pollutant to discuss, is essentially soot, and it comes in a variety of sizes. PM10 is a particulate that is 10 microns in size, and PM2.5 is a particulate that is 2.5 microns in size. PM can penetrate deep into the lungs and can worsen asthma and other respiratory conditions. Now, these pollutants, NOx, PM, hazardous air pollutants, they are what we sometimes call the local air pollutants from power plants. The other significant type of power plant pollution is greenhouse gas pollution. Greenhouse gases are a group of pollutants, including carbon dioxide, that trap heat in the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. Climate change, of course, threatens public health, safety, and the environment in a number of ways. For one, more people are exposed to dangerous and potentially deadly extreme weather events. Climate disasters have been increasing in frequency and intensity. Since 1980, there have been 376 weather and climate disasters in the United States, costing more than $1 billion each. And more than a quarter of these events have occurred in just the past 5 years. Okay, that was electricity made off-site and coming through the grid. Our next category is electricity made on-site. I'm also lumping in this category electricity made somewhere else but directly sold without going through the regular market to a data center. So electricity on-site. This is sometimes called co-location, where the data center and its source of electricity are sited together. Again, how you make the electricity matters. If the co-located power source, the electricity made on-site, is a fracked gas power plant, then we're going to see the same air impacts as we saw with electricity coming from the grid. If the co-located power source is a renewable source, the air impacts may be very different. For example, the data center chooses to build or co-locate with a large solar plant coupled with battery storage, then its air impacts will not include the air emissions of fracked gas plants. This is where we hear a lot of conversation about small nuclear reactors. And I do want to caution that while this has been proposed and discussed, there are no small nuclear reactors in operation, whether at a data center or elsewhere. Another caution here is the potential removal of clean energies from the electricity grid to provide power directly to data centers. We can see this in some of the proposals from data centers to contract with nuclear power plants. If that nuclear power is taken off the grid and is replaced with fracked gas produced power, then we'll have the same air impacts coming from that fracked gas produced power. Finally, category 3 is backup generation. The most important thing to the data center business model is to operate constantly, 24 hours a day, with no service interruptions. So data centers, whether they get their primary electricity from the grid or from on-site generation, are almost certain to have some kind of backup electricity source. That backup power is often diesel-powered generators. While a smaller data center may plan to only build a couple of backup generators, larger projects might have dozens. For example, a major data center project in Virginia has proposed installing 168 diesel generators, capable of delivering 504 megawatts of power. These diesel generators can range in size from 1.5 megawatts to over 3 megawatts each. Diesel generators emit significant amounts of particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, hazardous air pollutants, and carbon dioxide. These are the pollutants we've discussed in connection with fracked gas plants that degrade air quality, contribute to climate change, and pose serious health risks. Now, it's likely that the air permit for the data center would have limits on how often the diesel generators are supposed to run, and so it would be important to track to see if the backup generators are running more than they are permitted to. So in conclusion, we have to really focus on the impacts of electricity generation when we consider the air impacts of data centers and whether we are adding new or extending the life of older fossil fuel-fired electricity generation, particularly fracked gas-fired power plants, in determining the true impacts of a data center. Please check out the other videos in our data center series and the resources on our website, PennFuture.org, to learn more. Thanks very much.